Right, so this is me, who's looking less stressed now. It's just consistency, just so you know who I am. And we've got Kathy with us today as well. So as Angus said, I've been working in the fundraising world for over 30 years now. So this is it. I did start incredibly young. As a new graduate, sort of came into the industry. And as my grandmother said, I would eventually get a proper job. But I've had a proper job for many years and helped charities receive sort of raise incredible amounts of money. And it's thanks to the organisations like Ecclesiastical, who provide services, but also are a funder and do lots of incredible work. The Directory of Social Change is an umbrella body organisation. It's there to help you to help others, and they provide lots and lots of training, support to the third sector, lots of campaigning and lobbying, but also a huge range of publications. And I'm thrilled to have been invited to be part of some of those as well. So I'd like to add, it's when these on TV, it sort of comes up, who they are. It's a presenter and author. So this is it. I'll class myself as a trader, a fundraiser, a strategist, but also an author of this morning as well. I work with the DSC, the Directory of Social Change, and have done for many years, but also my company is Achieve Consultants, and I'm director of that company, helping organisations to achieve their full potential through raising the money they need to provide services. So what we're going to be doing today is really concentrating on fundraising sources. If you've not been with us previously, I know I mentioned if you were with us on that earlier introduction, but Angus has just mentioned we've had 2 other webinars so far. We started off looking at the fundraising environment, so please do go back and have a look at that. That was, sort of at the end of last year. And then we did a session, not that long before Christmas on fundraising planning. We've got 2 follow-on sessions, and at the end of my presentation, before we go into the Q&A, the details of those will come up, but I will probably mention them because it's relevant. And really, as I said before, I want to signpost you. But definitely in terms of signposting, the Ecclesiastical charity fundraising part of their website is somewhere that's packed full of resources. They're an incredible organisation doing an awful lot, to support the sector. Normally they do incredible work, but, they've gone, that sort of extra over and above, like charities are going over and above, they themselves are going over and above to do things to provide support and resources, guidance, help, and also funding. And we'll come back to that because I'm going to use them as a bit of an example later on. But what we're going to be doing today is thinking about the sources of funding to consider, the methods and tactics that we use to tap into them, and then some of the pros and cons relating to tapping into some of those different areas. Then we're going to open up for that question and answer session, so that any particular points that you want to put forward, then please do using that format, using the Q&A button that is being monitored. So without further ado, I just think we just need to do a tiny quick recap because we have the importance of a fundraising plan. So this is why I just want to say, don't just decide as something that you hear today, you're just going to go shooting off and do it. Think about what you're doing in terms of your fundraising activities. Think about it in a planned and strategic way so that you're not just sort of, dashing off and almost being, I don't know, it's a phrase I used last time, was it a bit like a headless chicken? Because if you do it in a planned way, you can make the most of the resources. It keeps you on track rather than just seeing an opportunity and trying to grab it. It may actually divert you from doing something that will actually raise you more money in the long term, or be another way to engage with your existing supporters or whatever. So think about, what we're talking about today within the format of your fundraising plan. So by having that plan, it helps us to achieve our goals and objectives. It also enables you to say no to others who's always popping in or sending an email or grabbing time in a meeting saying, why don't we do this? And sometimes you think, oh, that would be great, but it'll raise us, a couple of pounds if we're lucky, but I've got a plan in place and that's going to help us fulfill our objectives. Doesn't say there aren't opportunities that crop up. And again, I know lots of you out there have been opportunistic over the last sort of 10 months really, because some of the things that you're doing now wouldn't have be happening if it wasn't because you grabbed that opportunity. But just think about it within your wider fundraising plan. So it is linking, and it's a way to engage with your donors and supporters, or a way to actually attract and provide an offering for new ones. So when we look at our fundraising mix, we need to, try and consider what is fairly relatively low in terms of risk. So again, just bear that in mind when we're talking about some of the sources and the methods or tactics. It doesn't mean you shouldn't ever do anything that's higher risk, but your fundraising portfolio shouldn't just be full of high risk activities. You should be looking to have a few safer ones, some bankers, as I'll often refer to them as, things that work, your supporters like, you've got a track record in doing those areas, as well as then trying out a few new activities. But if you're doing new activities all the time, it's an awful lot of pressure, it's an awful lot of work, and you don't make the most if you're only doing one or two, because when you are doing a new activity, you really need to understand fully, obviously do the planning in advance, and then careful monitoring at every stage of the implementation, so that then you understand if things don't deliver in the way that you had anticipated. And it might raise less money, but it might also raise more money. But you can actually identify what were the factors that led to things being different than you'd anticipated. So you can either replicate them again in the future and build on them, or you can actually avoid them and see about how you would avoid or do things differently, so you weren't in that situation that perhaps led to that lack of fulfillment of that anticipated income. So we're looking, to make sure your fundraising is cost efficient, it's cost effective, because technically you're spending the organisation's money that otherwise could be delivering services. But obviously it's so important to invest in fundraising, because if you don't look to generate more money, you won't, as a charity and as an organisation, be able to have the income that's needed to deliver those services. So it's almost that which comes first, chicken or egg. But I know I'm from a fundraising background, but you need the money in order to actually deliver the services, to meet or help overcome the problem that your charity is there to solve. It needs to be realistic in terms of its implementation. So it doesn't need 50 people to do something when there's only you doing half-time hours on it. It needs to be acceptable to the organisation. I know some organisations, I'm going to talk about raffles and lotteries later. For some of you I know out there, that's just not going to be acceptable. Your morals and your values, your mission don't allow you to take income from that particular source. But it doesn't mean it's a bad source, it just means it doesn't fit within your organisation's thinking. And also we need a mixture of restricted and unrestricted income. Sometimes that unrestricted income isn't as cost effective. And sometimes it takes a little bit, there's more risk to getting that. But we do need that balance, because if all the income came in as restricted, it wouldn't give us that freedom to pilot new schemes. But also, as I often say, it's to actually buy the toilet rolls and the chocolate biscuits that every organisation, I always feel, definitely needed. So let's move on then and think about those fundraising sources. I think I needed a drink of water to take us onto these. So whenever we consider in any sort of fundraising planning process and looking at what are the sources as an organisation we could tap into, this is basically the list. So there's basically 6 main headings of sources, but these then break down into subsections or segments. And we use different methods or tactics to tap into those. Now, some of you might be sat there sort of, looking at your screen and saying, she's missed one, where's events? Well, I sometimes do actually stick on events, but when you think about it, that's a method. And in many instances, it may be a corporate who's supporting by being involved in an event. It may be a community organisation, or it's an event that's aimed at a certain community for them to get involved. Or it may be individuals who are signing up to take part in an event. So can you see where we're going? That is actually one of those tactics or the method that you'll actually use to tap into sources, possibly from a corporate, from a community, or from an individual. So it gives us a nice example of how it breaks down into sources and then the methods or the tactics. And then you say we've finally got on that list. Then you say is the earned income. So for some of you, and again, it's always interesting. Some organisations talk about income generation. Some talk about fundraising. Some organisations who talk about fundraising think about voluntary income to an organisation. So they scrap the statutory sources, possibly from a fundraiser's portfolio. Somebody else possibly in the organisation is looking at that. And possibly, again, sometimes earned income goes somewhere else as well. But it's not that I'm old fashioned, but I actually like the word fundraising because it actually does what it says on the tin. It's about raising the funds from for your organisation. And to give us sustainability and to protect ourselves, we need some sort of diversity. So we should never have all our eggs in one basket. We do need a number of baskets, and we do need a number of eggs in those different baskets. So using that analogy, these are the baskets here. And what I'm now going to start doing is going through each of those, and we'll start thinking about the eggs that fit into those baskets. I hope that works with everyone, and hope I'm not just obsessed. I do actually have some bantam chickens in my garden who are busy laying eggs, but getting away from that. I like that analogy. So these are our baskets. I'm going to talk about the eggs that go in those baskets now. Okay, so statutory sources. Yes, there's national government. I found a nice picture of Palace of Westminster, not one that's got scaffolding or tarpaulin. I've not been near London for a little while now, but whenever you see it on the TV at the moment, I know they're busy doing repairs and different things, but there's still money. And so often people say, "Oh no, there's no money in the statutory services." Well, like you said, that there is money in statutory sources. Sometimes it comes out as grants, but that is less so from a national level. It tends to be more contracts. So just keep thinking back to it. Statutory organisations, whether it's at national government, so whether it's sort of, the national government level, whether it's regional levels, whether it's regional development organisations who have national government money, whether it's county councils, whether it's local authorities that are oh gosh, the word's just gone from me. Unitary bodies, that's it. So separate unitary bodies, whether it's sort of even town councils, parish councils, district councils. And there's different levels of contracts. Contracts tend to be when it's a service that's wanting to be provided, but they themselves as an organisation don't have necessarily the capacity or the expertise to actually deliver it. And sometimes commercial organisations deliver those contracts. And again, I'm sure you can think within your own field of different experiences. Let's just say, for example, there are some prisons that are run by, commercial companies. There are some prisons that are run by statutory bodies that are part of national government. But and there are some charity involvement in the prison services as well. So can you see, it's sort of getting a bit mixed. We used to talk about three distinct sectors. There's lots of blurring of lines along the way. But in terms of a contract is awarded when it's a statutory obligation, a statutory duty, a statutory responsibility to provide a service. But the local authority or the national government or whoever doesn't necessarily provide it. They form a contract with somebody else to do it. If you were listening to the news this morning, there's lots of talk about, school dinners. We're not going to go down that road. But again, some schools are doing it themselves. That lovely deputy head teacher in Grimsby still sort of going there, making sort of sandwiches, dishing them out. Some of it, they've actually it's been subcontracted, but we're not going to the rights and wrongs of that or the success or otherwise. But I just want to give you some real life examples that you might have heard about recently. So there is still plenty of money out there in the statutory sources, definitely in the form of contracts, but also in grants. And I think the lower level that you come down to is my local sort of councillor who sits on the district council where I live in Suffolk. He actually said to me only at a meeting I was at back in February last year, he said, "Jill, I've still got money in my grants pot. Do you know of any local charities who need it?" And then again, that particular meeting that I was at, it was a community organisation in my village, and we'd actually just got a £5,000 grant from our parish council. So wherever you are, there is money. So definitely, consider what is available and see how you can actually access that. So our next category is grant making organisations. There's lots of organisations that fall into this, and this is where the DSC has funds online. Now, I know some of you may already subscribe to that, but it's a great way to actually sort of access and find out in that first category that I've got there, the trusts and foundations. In the UK, there's almost 9,000 grant making trusts and foundations. Colossal. Where do we find them? Well, there's lots and lots of different places that you will find them. Your local CVS or community action may have knowledge of local trusts and foundations. There are some lovely directories around, and if you can see on my bookshelf at the back here, I've got a few old directories there, and the DSC, as I mentioned before, does lots of research. Rebecca, who's here with us, she's actually part of the research team based up in the Liverpool office. So her day job is finding out and updating some of this information that appears in some of the DSC's directories. But also there is the online facility, and there's a couple of different providers, but I know it's my go-to place when I'm actually researching trusts and foundations. I log on to my funds online account, put in on the search, and then ping, 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 up they pop. Sometimes you know a name. I do lots of research by looking at other charities similar to what I'm doing, or the charity I'm involved with is doing, or I look at who's working and raising money in a specific geographical area. So sometimes you say from somebody else's annual report or on their website, or even from a funder's something perhaps has been a press release, I can put in the name of the organisation, the grant maker, or I can do a search and it will find grant makers who will actually support, whether it's a specific geographical area or whether it's a specific cause. I know before Christmas, I was doing some work with an international organisation working in sub-Saharan Africa. So again, we got the chance through some government funding to, they were going to match fund every pound that that organisation raised before March. So we were sort of definitely looking at the trust and foundation sector to see who we could put an application in, but also importantly, who would be meeting and making a decision, because that to fulfill the match funding criteria, we did need to receive the money or at least be awarded the grant. But you say there's lots of organisations out there in terms of that trusts and foundations. Sometimes they've been set up by individuals during their lifetime, sometimes on their death, sometimes it's families, sometimes it's organisations, and sometimes it's companies. I'm going to come back to companies a bit more under the corporate section, which we're going to come on to next. But do be aware, depending, you say, if you're a larger fundraising team, you may have somebody who deals with companies and corporate fundraising, support from those corporates, but you may have, or it may even be you who's the person who looks after trusts and foundations. On the whole, if it's a community, if it's a corporate trust, the person dealing with trusts and foundations will deal with it. But it is one of those sort of grey areas, because sometimes it is about having a relationship with the corporate, and the way that they may choose to support you is by giving you cash. We'll talk about some of the other ways in a minute. But sometimes if it is direct cash, direct to your work, that often comes from a trust. Not all the time, but sometimes. Obviously, there's community foundations out there as well, which again are umbrella bodies, but they actually manage lots of smaller funds on behalf of the fund holders. So different organisations have them managed. Sometimes it's the private banks. So when you're perhaps doing some research on trusts and foundations, you might see that the address for correspondence is perhaps a bank. It might be Coots, or it might be, NatWest. They have a trust department. It might be a solicitor's practice, or it may be they've got their own offices, they've got their own staff. But what the community foundations do, they act as a management organisation, one of the functions, should I say. They do lots of different things, but they hold smaller amounts of money for individuals or organisations who say, well, we want someone who's close to the ground in our area, who knows what's happening in the grassroots level. So they actually have them invest their money, but also help with the grant process. So definitely, if you've not found your community foundations, they're spread throughout the whole of the UK. So do sort of tap into those. There are other sort of national lottery pots, such as the National Lottery Community Fund. It's forever changing its name, and I still want to call it HLF, but it is the National Lottery Heritage Fund as well. So you say, so if you're thinking about lottery funds, they are definitely fall within this category of grant makers. And then there's other sort of different pots of money, and the Landfill Communities Fund is an example of one of those. So if you've got a landfill operator in a 10-mile radius from where you're operating, then you're likely to qualify for support from them. And it's not just where there's a tip, you know, that landfill site, it's their offices as well. Because you say, when I go to the station, where if I am normally going to London, when I'm stood on the platform, I can actually see a base where all those big sort of, you know, refuse carts actually sort of, it's their base. It's literally that's all that's there, but anything in a 10-mile radius of that would then qualify as well. And it's their offices. So definitely you say for a checklist to help improve your chances of success, you say, I did say there's lots of resources at Ecclesiastical's website. Go through to the charity fundraising bit and there is a checklist for grant applications. So do go and click on that. And you say, because while you are putting some effort into doing these approaches, what you want to do is increase your chances of success. And there is a great checklist there. Again, DSC, and I run some trust fundraising courses with the DSC to actually really help you improve your trust applications as well. But you say, do read their guidelines and make sure you follow those when you're doing an application. Some have got forms that you fill in. Some want what they call a freestyle application. But again, this is where it's important to do your research, not to just fire these things off. Sometimes I come across people, and I can recall a conversation I had with a lovely volunteer trust fundraiser from an organisation. I was speaking at a conference and he grabbed me at the end. He said, "Oh, Jill," he said, "I'm losing heart with applying to trusts and foundations." Another volunteer and I, we had a list of 80 and we sat down. We worked well into the night between us. We sent all these letters off. 80 we sent, all that postage. And we got 2 replies and only one of those had a check in it. How rude it was that they didn't even reply to say that we weren't being funded. Well, these themselves are themselves charities. So that is very often why they don't let you know if you've been successful. So that is one of the cons, the negatives of it. Sometimes you put an application in and you don't know when you're going to hear. Some of them only meet once a year. And I said before, it is the 13th of January. Just imagine their deadline was the 4th of January, and they only do that once a year. So you've almost 358 days to wait before your grant application will be considered. So one of the cons of it is sometimes it's long term. At the moment, lots of trusts, not them all, but lots of trusts are actually sort of, they've speeded up that process. Some, though, are still very much in what I call the analog age. They don't feel they can meet at the moment. They've not discovered Zoom, or perhaps haven't got the technology or the equipment or the skills to actually do that. I know lots and lots of trustees meetings have gone online and they're doing it by Zoom. One thing is there's more trust applications being submitted electronically. But again, one that I was researching about 12 months ago, when I was looking at the guidelines, it actually said they wanted 9 hard copies of your application. And I can tell you now, if I'd only sent 8 or only sent 1, it would have gone straight away onto the no pile. I'd not fulfilled their criteria. So that's why it's so important to do your research and then match what you're telling them to what they need to know. Sorry if I'm going to give anyone the heebie-jeebies, but do you remember when you were actually doing school exams? Or even, you say, not just school exams, but even university exams. But it's one of those basic pieces of advice I remember. I can even quote my biology teacher saying, Don't actually give the whole sex life of a dogfish to the answer to your biology exam question if they're actually wanting to know about photosynthesis in plants. Now, I know that's an extreme example, but it is one that actually has stayed with me. Hopefully, it did me some good through my academic sort of, career. But I still apply that process to trusts. So if they say they are interested about supporting organisations who are helping young people in serious poverty, don't start describing your own people's work or your work with older people unless it is intergenerational. You may be a complex organization that does lots of different things, but focus it on the things that they're interested in. Because otherwise, they just get so much waffle and bamboozle. They say, no, they're not doing what we're asking for. So, really make it a targeted fit to the trust that you're approaching. And don't just have this standard spiel that you churn out. Again, we often refer to it as a standard round robin. I know robins are puffing up at the moment, and I've got one that regularly I see from my kitchen window at the moment. But it does remind me again, is, if you're sitting reading, whether it's online, whether it's on a piece of paper, you don't want to feel that is being churned out and sent out to lots of different funders, like that gentleman I told you about before. Him and his volunteer colleagues sent out 80. It was the same damn letter that they sent to everyone. I actually think it's really rude. It's bad manners. Just think about the process. I often say, your P's and Q's are part of fundraising. If you're expecting someone to give you £1,000, £500, 5,000, 50,000, they don't just want to hear some standard information. I say, how rude. Let's just look. Let's us as an organisation invest some time understanding who they are, what's important to them, and then writing some information, whether it's an application form, whether it's that sort of proposal, that's specifically targeted at them and the things that they're interested in. Follow that advice, and you're already putting a tick in one of your boxes to increase your chances of success. Anyway, this whole session isn't about being successful with trust. And I know some of you are saying, oh, we're already quite good at that. Let's find out a bit more about some of those other sources. So I did say the next one that would come on to, because there's a few links, because sometimes companies, corporates, they have a grant making trust. So companies, corporate support is incredibly valuable to the whole of the voluntary sector. But again, some of us get a bit tunnel vision. We just want money. We want cash. Now, as I mentioned before, sometimes cash will come from a company, but it won't come from the company directly. It might come from their grant making trust. It might come from sponsorship, which is a different budget totally. There's a sponsorship or a marketing budget, an advertising budget, perhaps. So it's thinking, are we able to give very tangible benefits back in return? And as with any potential supporter that we're going to be approaching, we're doing a lot more about our messaging on the next session that takes place on the 21st of January. So we're going to talk about that, matching what funders, donors, supporters are looking for, about their motivations and sort of our messaging back. We're doing much more about that in the next session. But just remember, one of those basic principles I shared last time when we were talking about fundraising planning, it always has to be a win-win. They get something, we get something. Sometimes it's a feeling, sometimes it's something that isn't tangible. So sometimes a company, want to be associated with you as a charity, with you as an organisation. You've got some good profile. You're reaching parts that they otherwise couldn't reach. By association with you, it might open up some new markets. It's indirect, it's not direct, but they may be some of the reasons why a company might be interested in getting involved with you. Some companies are saying, we've got a corporate social responsibility policy. We've made our money in this community. We want to give something back to this community. And that's something that definitely underpins what ecclesiastical do. And they actually have a grant scheme. An award scheme. And that goes under their Movement for Good award scheme, and they were doing, before Christmas, the 12 days of giving. I love that twist on the 12 days of Christmas, and they did the 12 days of giving, where they gave away £120,000. Yep, I said that. £120,000 to 120 charities in 12 days. So you've worked it out. You say it was £1,000 went to each of those charities. And their 2020 programme overall was about giving away £1 million to charities. Their phase one was about 500 charities, each receiving £1,000. The phase two of that programme, that award scheme, was that 10 charities got £50,000. So, as you can see, charitable giving is at the heart of ecclesiastical and has been for their 130 years of existence. So, do check out when you're researching a company that you may have identified as being someone of interest to yours, a company of interest to your charity. See what they've done in the past. And it may be you discover they've got an award scheme or they regularly give sponsorship. Or it might be it's more employee related, where they give you access to their staff, or they have what we call COTI, a charity of the year, although it tends to be they're extending that is charity of the next 2 years or charity of the next 3 years. But this is it's about very much sort of possibly the company even doing match funding, but definitely staff members. I mentioned my family before. My nephew, who's actually celebrating his birthday today, he actually is a project manager in a charity. And my sister, who does four hours work a week in HR in Morrison's, she did a fundraiser for John's charity. And she was amazed. First of all, I think she shocked herself. She managed to raise quite a decent amount of money. But then somebody at work said to her, well, we do at Morrison's match fund that. So she literally just found this sort of form to do it on their intranet scheme, and all of a sudden the amount that she was chuffed about, she'd actually raised over 5,000 for John's charity. But next thing, she was even happier. And I think Morrison's were hoping she was feeling really rewarded by being employed by them because they matched it. So John's charity got over £10,000 as a result of what she did. So this is it. But again, sometimes that's real cash we're talking about there. But also think about the other things. Some companies do secondments. They might second a member of staff to you 1 day a week for the next 4 months. They might, I know John Lewis, he said, obviously before the pandemic hit, I'm not quite sure what they're just doing currently, but they used to give a member of staff for 6 months. Imagine. I was talking to someone who literally was that John Lewis employee. He said, I've got 6 months with this charity. Don't worry, it's not just big charity. She said, there's only 3 staff. I've got a marketing background. I really want to, make the most of my time with them. And we had a bit of a session as to things that she could do to really help them and make a difference. But also sometimes charities organisations, because of who they're working with, their client group, they may be looking for placements for work experience or to give them some extra skills and different things. So it could well be, the first involvement you have with a corporate is actually helping you to fulfil your services by actually, working with that company who's offering you the chance of some placements. It may be they give mentoring to your service users, but also what about a business mentor, perhaps a chief exec from a company in your area, possibly mentoring a new chief exec that you've got, or again, somebody in marketing, helping support your fundraising team, somebody in communications supporting and mentoring. Gifts in kind are great, and also pro bono work, which I know you tend to think sometimes as that as gifts in kind, but I think of gifts in kind being those tangible things, but that pro bono work being perhaps those knowledge and services. But also they may provide a forum in which to do something. There's a great charity that again will be really struggling at the moment. Is that I know they do collections of winter coats. Is that I usually go in and out of Liverpool Street Station in London an awful lot, and it's round about November time. They're doing big collections where they're asking people to donate winter coats, and they use sort of train stations as a place to get their message out. But lots of companies actually share that message with their staff and people associated with the organisation, saying, we're having a collection day, on the 15th of November, bring in any coats because they're going to be collected, and those coats go to homeless people to help keep them warm. So I think you're getting the gist. I'm not going to go through all those things, but on there, but get the gist and just think about what you've got to offer, what a company might be looking for, and what could be useful to you. Yes, you might think you want cash, but sometimes these other things are even more valuable than cash. Maybe you're looking for a new trustee. That company that you've got a relationship, they may be the place to actually help fulfill that. So let's move on to our next source, which is the community. It's a huge area of support, you say, and it's lots of things have changed about what we think about the community. We've got online communities, we've got the community where we live, we've got a work community, a community possibly where you socialize or where you've got interests. And this is where there's a lot of, thought around much more community involvement at the moment. There's lots of, and I haven't looked at the new report out from Ecclesiastical that say it's just over a week old, and I'm definitely, when we finish this, going to go in there. But there is overall, because I'm keeping myself up to date with lots of research and things that are going on out there. And one of the things that is coming through is that communities are becoming tighter. Communities are wanting to help each other. So people or organizations that they feel are part of that community. But, do think about community in the widest terms. It isn't just this physical community where you possibly live, although that is an important one. But just think about some of those sort of, other definitions of what community may be. Because people are part of global communities. There may be a gaming community. I was joking, if you were on the call earlier, Kathy and I were talking about board games over Christmas, and I was saying about playing Monopoly with my sister. She's down in Cornwall, and we set this up via Zoom. Unfortunately, we had Zoom extensions. But this is it, that, people belong to chess clubs that aren't just, people who live down the road, even though they might be in this current lockdown situation, and people possibly who normally meet at the gym, they're doing an exercise class online together. But that in itself, I'd say, is a mini community that we might be able to tap into. And it might be that exercise class, or that slimming world class that's gone online. Gyms and slimming clubs see a big rise in January, people joining them, part of that New Year's resolution. This is the year I'm going to get fit, or this is the year I'm going to get fit and lose some weight. So again, we might be able to tap into those as a distinct community, as well as a wider community as well. And there's lots of organizations that exist out in communities. They're viewed as community organizations, like many charities are, but some of those are there to support others in the community, such as Roundtable, Rotary, Lions, the Masons, Ladies Circle. So they may even be able to provide you with direct cash. They may already have money in their bank account that they're saying, yes, we can do this. They're still meeting. Again, I was talking to a hospital fundraiser only last week, and she said, oh, I'm doing my first Rotary talk via Zoom, but they're still meeting, and they're dying to know what's going on in terms of what's happening at the hospital, but also how we're raising money and what we want money for. And again, there's been lots on the news today about the mental health support for doctors and nurses who are directly treating patients with COVID at the moment is a big crying out need. So they might be able to help with direct cash, but they may be able to run events that in turn raise money for you. And again, just as individuals, just as companies are still doing things to raise money, community organizations are looking for things to gel them together. So it might not be they do it now, but they're doing it. So you might not sort of get the cash in the next 2 weeks, but they may say, well, we'll plan it, and later on. So they might do a wine tasting evening. I've heard of some good ones. I've not been invited to one yet, but perhaps that's on the card. So if anyone out there is going to do a wine tasting event, find me on LinkedIn and invite me. Provide resources and volunteers. We're hearing so much about volunteers helping marshal at the moment, marshalling these vaccination centres. But again, if you yourself are running an event, you might want some extra bodies. I'm not talking about dead ones, but some bodies to actually help. Well, again, sometimes those community organisations are a great source to tap into with that. Things like the Army Cadets, the Air Training Corps, they love a logistics exercise to get involved with. And again, I remember, when I could go to events, but I remember going to something and there was a big car park and it was the scouts. They got walkie-talkies, they were manning the car park, they were parking people so they could get as many park well into that car park, and then they weren't causing an annoyance to their neighbours, and people themselves weren't then saying the car park was full, I couldn't park, and so I never went to the event. So this is it. Just think what it is that organisations and individuals in the community who can help you. Again, mayor's funds, just a really easy one. There's no point contacting your current mayor, but every single mayor, I know there's some big mayors out there, you know, sort of, we quite often see the likes of Andy Burnham as the mayor of Manchester area on the TV, but every local authority area has got a mayor and they usually have a mayor's fund. So never talk to the mayor direct because they've already selected their charity, but it's going to be the incoming mayor is the one definitely the moment to think about having a conversation with. Right, our next area is individuals, and there's so many ways that individuals can support us. If you were in on our first session where I gave quite a lot of stats, again, go back and have a look at it, but individuals are the biggest source of income to the voluntary sector. Remember that. So yes, we want to spend money and effort and time and investment, you know, approaching grant making bodies. We need to be thinking about corporates. We need to be thinking about the community. But remember, it's people, individuals. And again, there's so many ways. If we were all live, I bet, you know, and I'm just looking, there's 424 participants. Do you know what? If you gave it some thought, I bet we could come up with somebody else has just joined. 425 participants. I bet we could think of 425 ways that individuals could actually get involved and raise money for our organisations. So as you can see, that list is really just a drop in the ocean. But yes, they can give cash, and they can give cash in lots of different ways. They can do text giving. So again, it's the method, it's the tactic that we're using, and that ties in with communication. So I'm going to give my advert now again for our next session, which is next week on the 21st. So we use different communication methods to ask people to do different things. So again, tapping in. And again, it sounds really, really bad if I say, you know, people are giving money in memory of someone who's died. If, like me, you're absolutely horrified, you know, just through the pandemic alone, through COVID, people who've had a positive test within 28 days, that figure that gets announced every day, you know, it's well in excess of 80,000. It is so catastrophic, and it's so sad for those people who have lost a dad, a mum, a father, a brother, a sister. And again, I've got friends and relatives who, again, they've lost someone very close to them. It really is very tragic. But at a time of tragedy, people often want to do something to remember someone special. And please don't think I'm saying it's about cashing in, but it's about providing an opportunity. And it may be your charity, your cause was really close to their heart. So it's about providing that opportunity that they can do something to give in memory to your organisation as a way to remember that person who was very special, and as a way to recognise that life. Then we sort of go on to sort of legacies, or as we tend to refer to it, inwardly I talk about legacies, outwardly is what it says on the tin. It's a gift in a will. And I'm going to move on in a minute to that and just share some thoughts. But lots of people are sort of generating money. People are giving, and that seems a little bit more transactional, but people are also generating. So when you're thinking about individuals, think about how they're going to get involved. And are they going to give direct? And that might be sort of, you know, a one-off gift. It might be a regular gift. So they set up a direct debit or a standing order. They become a member of your organisation. So that helps you with your long-term sustainability, because whilst you can never guarantee, because somebody might always cancel that standing order or that membership, but you know, you can almost start to plan for roughly. And when you've been doing it for a while, you'll start to understand what your attrition rate is, what your drop-off rate is, how many people do cancel. But once it's set up, often it then continues long-term as well. It might increase, but also if you do have a direct mail scheme, or you've recruited people from direct mail. They may have upped their donation amount, their regular giving amount, but sometimes people may contact you to say, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to cancel this. And again, it's not about putting pressure on people, but if they've contacted you, they want to let you know this money won't be coming in. And it may be they just feel at the moment, whether they've lost their job, gone on to part-time working, they're being furloughed, possibly even, taking early retirement at the moment, or circumstances have changed. Don't just think that they have to cancel. Just see if a lower amount might be helpful. Because I think if they've taken that opportunity to contact you, they're really worried and want to let you know this money won't be coming. So you say, just offer them. We're so used to being contacted to upgrade, or as fundraisers look to upgrade, but also sometimes it's better to retain them than to lose them. But you say, don't ever put pressure on people, but just say, I don't know if you considered whether you wanted to reduce the amount while you're in this situation or whatever. So just think about that. So people give, but they also generate. So just think about how it is that that's going to help. So we've touched on some of those, but I just want to very quickly just bring a couple of other points. When people are giving, say make sure it's done as tax effectively as possible. So obviously, if someone is giving a straight cash donation, or if somebody's sponsoring someone who's generating, constantly make sure that you are saying, is it being done under gift aid? And that's why I know some charities, some individuals still love that good old fashioned sponsor form. But again, when people are using the online giving platforms, obviously things like Just Giving, Virgin Giving, what it does when you email it is send a link or somebody clicks on your page, when they donate, it then automatically asks you. So the uptake of people signing up and saying yes, do it under gift aid is an awful lot higher. So besides the fact you get the money quicker, because if someone's doing an event and doing that paper sponsorship, asking people, will you sponsor me? They only tend to collect the money when they've finished or completed the activity. So if I was sort of decided to do a sponsored slim and said, oh, I'm going to lose 2 stone, you're going to have to wait a long time, I can imagine, before you're going to get that money that people had sponsored me if I was doing it through that paper sponsorship. Where now people tend to say, oh, yes, I'll sponsor you, Jill, but it becomes a donation. They might have decided to sponsor me with £10. They do it through Just Giving, but it automatically comes to you in the next couple of weeks. And it won't just come as £10. It will come with the gift aid reclaimed, minus obviously that small admin fee. So do think about everything you're doing and are you making the most of it being tax effective? People give houses or property. Again, you might be saying, really, Jill? But they do. But again, for some people, it is a way of actually doing it tax effectively. Many people, many properties that are given are in a will. So obviously that is part of it being tax effective in terms of inheritance tax, because donations to charity and the value of gifts to charity are actually taken out of the estate value before inheritance tax is calculated. But just suppose you inherited a property, you might say, I don't need this, don't want it, it's a pain in the neck, I'm going to donate it to charity. So if someone, and they've got a time which they can do that, but otherwise they're owning it and it then becomes subject to capital gains tax if they actually then sell it. And there's talk about increases coming with capital gains tax. So people who possibly even have a holiday home, a second home, may say either decide to sell it now or even say if they don't do it quickly and then later on they realize, crikey, when I sell this, possibly even half what I make on it is going to go in tax. I'd rather just give it to a charity. So be aware of that. Payroll giving, we mentioned it was on that list under corporates. A corporate has to have a payroll giving scheme, but an individual has to join it. So it often appears on both lists. But basically the donation is made at source, so it's tax effective. Legacies, as we've already mentioned, a gift to a charity is given before inheritance tax is calculated or taken out of it. A couple of other quick sort of facts and figures. You might want to sort of look at this in more detail later, but Legacy Foresight, who does lots of research around this area, definitely are predicting, charitable bequests, gifts in wills is going to increase by almost a quarter over the next 10 years. So if you're not doing something about it, get on with it. And also some research I've just come across, it literally is just new out this week. Fair Will, sorry, who are online will writers, some incredible stats. There's a rise of 267% in people making their wills with them. And that world events, I find this fascinating. World events have had a big event. And the day that most events were written was the day that Boris Johnson went into intensive care. And also, they saw a big drop when the Pfizer vaccine was approved in the UK. But from what they've been sort of monitoring, another £150 million has been pledged to charities in the wills that they've been involved with. So some interesting facts and figures there. Individuals might say no one's dealing with cash at the moment. Again, I know those of you, I say I'm doing some work with some heritage projects at the moment, and I know none of their buildings or venues or anything are open. But no one's dealing with cash, and I love this botany image with a charity shop that's closed, and they've got a text to donate machine on the inside of their window. But again, even Natural History Museum encouraging people when they do go in to give a donation, but it's all contactless. Again, text giving, just think about what's going on with there. And you say we've seen some huge increases with people using that because of this lack of wanting to use real cash. Individuals might adopt something. Again, have you got something? And I've chosen different sorts of organisation here just to give you an example. The Tees Valley Youth Orchestra, we're funding a tour to America. So they were saying sponsor a seat to help us raise the funds for this American tour. Don't you love this? It is actually a beaver there. Help protect UK wildlife by sponsoring an animal, adopt an animal. And then even here, this one at the bottom is RAF, their museum. I've forgotten where it is. It's just coming to my information. Yeah, it's at Cosford. That's it. The RFU Museum. They do a scheme of adopt an artifact. You don't take it home, but you're helping with generating income. And these adoption schemes do tend to go on. People then sign up year after year. Again, I mentioned before, but raffles, again, it's a way individuals can support, but it may be a company gives you the prize. Now, again, I know a couple of charities who've had cars donated recently. Car sales aren't doing very well at the moment. And again, they're saying, well, it's a way we can get some increased profile, some interest in our products and our cars, but also we've really got this one license, we need to get rid of it. And so by making a donation to a charity of the car, and the charity then does a car raffle. But even if it is a bottle of malt whiskey, again, different ways. But this is an example of Raffleux, which again, you can go and have a look at some more information. I'm conscious time's rattling on, but to say, it might be you're thinking of this as individuals or a way of earning money, because technically a regular lottery is part of many organisations' income generation strategy, but it becomes under their sort of earned income. And again, you might have your own lottery, but again, there is a charity that I'm aware of that actually runs a lottery scheme for other charities to actually join. So all the any sort of, and I put it in inverted commas, the profit that makes for them, it actually goes into their coffers rather than a commercial organisation. But it is also a risk-free way. It reduces the risk for perhaps some organisation who just feel it's too high risk to actually set up a regular, perhaps, weekly lottery. Again, they take some of that risk. So again, if it's something that you're considering, you might want to look into that, because it is a way of getting regular supporters who often then become donors. Very often when they get that letter saying, or the email saying you've won the prize this week, they often donate it back. Some people do like that £1,000 or whatever the prize is, but also, again, there's lots and lots of evidence that those lottery players become supporters and even legators later on. Then our final area is that, I've mentioned, was earning income. It may be your charity's got some shops, or you run a cafe. Now that might be a pure income generator, or it might be part of generating sort of skills, providing services. It's part of your service delivery for perhaps the service users that you have to get experience, run service and run skill qualifications or whatever. It may be you've got a shop, a shop's sort of definitely come under the earning, the trading, if it's not primary purpose. But also, you say eBay, if you don't physically have a shop, or you say that obviously shops are shut, and many charities who've got physical shops are doing a lot more eBay work at the moment. But also you might have a venue that, and again, I know at the moment, no one's hiring out venues for conferences, exhibitions, product launches, or even, things like weddings and anniversary celebrations, parties and whatever. Maybe you've got consultancy or expertise that people could also buy in. So coming to the end now. So there's lots and lots of different sources out there to tap into using those different methods or techniques. Going digital is our topic for our final webinar on the 2nd of January, 2nd of February. I'll get the date right. And do remember, within any fundraising portfolio, there will be some quick wins, but also you want some long-term gains as well, so that you've got things that will bring in money now, but also you're putting down the foundations to get money in the longer term. So going back to my comment, what you need is not just one basket and one egg. You need a number of baskets and a number of eggs. So don't put all your fundraising eggs in one basket. So that brings us now to our question and answer. I know we were a bit late starting, so we still have, we've got a good 25 minutes now for question and answers. So let's go over. I'm going to sort of stop the share and we'll see what questions we've got, Kathy, that have been coming through.
Hi, Jill. Great, brilliant session. Thank you very much. Always on the edge of my seat. Ideas popping into my head for different things we can do. Thank you very much. Okay, I've tried to group a couple of things. Start with some straightforward ones, I think. You'll recognise this is a familiar worry, a new charity, and they've no fundraising history and they've no core funding. The question was kind of, what do we do? And I'm assuming the fear is based on that they don't look like a solid bet to a funder. You've come across before, I'm sure.
Definitely, because it's like, where do we start? Obviously, you say resources are terribly precious. You perhaps are just a group of volunteers at this moment in time. So again, how do you convince a donor, a supporter, a funder that you're worthy of support? Well, go back to those basic principles. Why do we exist? Why were we set up? And then you say initially, what I would suggest, because of thinking about that realistic in terms of its implementation, there's a couple of key areas I would definitely sort of be looking at. Trusts and foundations, definitely one area, but bear in mind that the time lag sometimes from finding out about them, getting the information together to submit an application, and then for them to meet and make a decision. So it's not going to be instant money, but as I mentioned before, things that people trust are processing things quicker. There's quite a few emergency funds out there. So maybe you've been formed because of a current situation. So there are lots of COVID specific funds out there. Go back to that earlier presentation one, the webinar one that we did. Again, there's some sources of information there to go in and have a look at, but dig onto the DSE's website, because again, there's other information there about funders. But also the other area is potentially major donors. Have you any connections with people who could perhaps, you say you've got a specific need, could they actually help you with this? And it may even be you want to, employ someone. So again, to be honest, I know so many people talk about core costs, and it's the most unsexy thing to raise money for. And they say, but that's what we need. We need core costs. Well, I say just dump that phrase. And I sit on some funding panels as well. I can tell you now, My heart drops right down to my big toe when I hear, I want core costs. I think, no, don't tell us you want core costs. Tell us what you're trying to achieve and how we can help you with that. And that we need this amount of money in order to achieve this. But if you say, we're a good course we've set up, we need core costs, I'm not going to fund you. And many other funders out there won't. So remember about your message. Again, lots more next time on messaging, but tell us who you are and what you're doing. Give us, as a new organization, give us some credibility, a quote from perhaps someone who says, this is so vital. I've got this problem and no one was there to help me until this organization existed. It maybe is education related. What about your director of education giving a quote? A service user, possibly one of your clients, one of your pupils, whatever you want to call them, someone who's perhaps already benefited possibly from a pilot scheme that you've run. A great quote or their case study can actually help give you some credibility. So use all of those, but definitely tune into our next session on the 21st next week. Right, next one, Kathy. Hope they gave lots of bits and pieces to other people.
Great. A reserves question, Jill. Yeah, the usual suspects. I love these questions. So reserves question. If a charity, there were a couple, so I've kind of made them together. If a charity has reserves, will this stop them getting funders? And somebody said, actually, on the back of that question, what is the best balanced amount of reserves to have? They know of one charity who had lots of reserves and were penalised on that basis. You don't need money from us. But then another charity who had very little or none, who look, again, you're not stable, you're not a good bet. What are your thoughts?
And Kathy, you've just sort of put your finger on the pulse there. It's very often why some funders even ask it as possibly if they're on their form, they'll say, what level of reserves have you got? Now, sometimes it's not the actual physical amount, what is in your bank account and, what's the bank balance. It's often expressed in months running costs. And again, I remember this has been a hot topic for so long. And I remember quite a few years ago, I have been around a while, but I really think the Charity Commission came up really good with something at the time when they were being put under quite a lot of pressure. I think from external to the sector saying, you really need to give something definitive. What should charities have as a reserves? In the end, within the SORP, the Statement of Recommended Practice, when a charity submits their account, they actually have to say what their reserves policy is. And the Charity Commission, they weren't sitting on the fence by saying it's not up to us to decide. They were saying every organisation's different and it's up to every organisation to decide what's appropriate to them. And I do remember being quite involved in this at the time. And there was one big organisation who had a huge commitment. And they said, because of this commitment we have that is a national remit, we feel we need to have 2 years running costs. And what they mean by running costs is, and it's almost like we're at this sort of point now, it's, if no more money comes into our organisation, how long can we exist for? And that is why it's often measured in months of running costs. And they said, we feel because of this commitment, and if we suddenly withdrew our services, at least if we said, crikey, we've no more money coming in, and if no more money comes in 2 years' time, we'll be shutting down. It was like giving notice. So they said, we feel that's why. So they were in a position to be able to justify why they needed that amount of money. And then just imagine, let's make it real. Perhaps a parent and toddler group. I talked about my village before. We've got a village hall. I do know that there's a parent and toddler group. When they used to meet. The village hall, that they're not on a lease. They've not got a 5-year commitment to a lease for a Tuesday morning to reserve this slot. I reckon they probably it's a bit of an automatic booking, and they may, if they cancel next week's, and obviously they've had to cancel next week's, but if in a normal situation, if they said, oh crikey, we can only run till the end of January and we've no more money, we're gonna have to stop. And their running costs, they're all volunteers. They need some money for replacement toys. They need some money for the squash and the coffee, extra strong coffee possibly, and biscuits. But to be honest, if we've just got a month's running costs, we're absolutely fine. In fact, we're probably so it's about each organisation deciding what's appropriate. And you have to state that. So for some of you, go back and look what it actually says in your last annual accounts. But then this is where many funders start to say, you've too much money. And at the end of the day, what are reserves for? Well, basically, reserves are there for a rainy day. Now, I'm talking metaphorically now, but if I look out my window, it's pouring down at the moment. It isn't, it's quite sunny. But, you know, we're in this rainy day moment at the moment. So reserves are there for when emergencies hit. Now, obviously, if you're just spending all your reserves at the moment, you know, you're going to run out. And what funders are saying, why are you asking us for money when you're not putting some in yourself? I can see you're sat on a stash of cash. And for some organisation, and I know some are out there, they're sat on huge amounts of money. And trustees are being very cautious. Well, if we spend that, we'll never be here. But put the funder's hat on. And that's what I often do is sometimes say, and I think for any sort of fundraising, it's a really good tip. Just imagine you're the donor, the funder, the supporter. What would I think if I'm not in the fundraising position, if I'm in the donor supporter mode? What would I say about this? So again, at the moment, if you feel you've got quite a bit of money in your reserves, tell them how you're spending it or why you're keeping some of it back. And even if you're applying for something specific, unless you're using a total full cost recovery model and asking for every single pence and pound of that. So what we talk about full cost recovery is, what are your direct costs to do a piece of work and what are the indirect costs? Direct costs, yeah, it might be the room you have to hire or the IT equipment you've got to buy, the license of software, but you might be recruiting a project manager to run this. So there's some HR costs. You know, your director's time, there may be 2 days input of those. So those are the indirect costs. But so often, perhaps for sake of argument, mass, it might be the whole project to actually run on a full cost recovery model is £80,000 for the next 12 months. But you've already got some of the funding. Your chief exec 2 days are already paid for. Your HR function is already paid for. So you can then say, overall, this is going to cost us 80,000. We as an organisation are committing to fund the indirect cost to a tune of £22,872, and be precise, not to the penny though. And it shows that you're, you know, committed to this. You want to make it work. It's almost like you're doing a match funding. You're saying we put some money in, and to make our money stretch and work harder, we're hoping somebody else will support us so we can deliver this work. So I hope that covers quite a lot of points that may have come up with some of those questions, Kathy.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, a couple of simple yes/no ones, because I have stacks of questions here, so apologies in advance to the many that we won't get to. There are a number of them in there on, we're building this, doing that, running that project, tell me some funders. We couldn't go through all of those, but if you'd like to put those in the chat, I'm sure loads of your colleagues out in the sector, they will be able to add to that. And always come and ask Directory of Social Change for a starting point, but we can't answer every individual funder's question. A couple of straightforward ones though. Things like, do local authorities publish their contracts and are they obliged to?
Through the Freedom of Information Act, they have to declare that information. So whether it's published, you say you can probably spend a long time on a website. What I would do is go through to the chief exec's office and ask for that information. They may just say, yeah, it's published. And you say, first of all, just have a look on their website. Each local authority has definitely got a website. Have a bit of a Google search, you know, and use the search function there. But again, you'll probably... some aren't the easiest to navigate. So again, probably chief exec's office is the place to go to, and they will point you in the right direction. Quick email and you'll find out.
Okay, thank you. And it's the multiple applications question as well. What about sending a project application to multiple funders simultaneously?
Absolutely. You're not going to sit there. They all expect you to be doing multiple applications. They will think you're terribly naive. If, let's just go back to that project, you know, you want 80,000, you're putting some money in, let's just say the shortfall is £59,200. They're not going to sit there. They're not going to think you're sitting there putting one application in at a time. Also, some funders will never fund 100%. It's their principle, again, of a way to stretch their money. Excuse me. And it's not just about stretching their money. They're wanting to test you. How good are you at attracting other money? So when their money runs out, you can get it. Also, sometimes they just think, are we a bit loopy here? But they're thinking, is it just us that thinks this is good? And then as a result of it, they'll not be able to fund it in the future. So sometimes it's a way to actually encourage you to find other funders that then demonstrates, no, it's not just us that's quirky and likes this approach, that it is part of that sustainability. So no, definitely get some in. Some funders work closely together, so make sure you share. Again, I can always remember having an application into both Henry Smith's and Tudor Trust together. One of them rang me 1 week and said, I know they've just met recently. Have you heard? I said, no, but we had a phone call that afternoon, and I rang them back and they said, good, we can update because our trustees are meeting next Wednesday. And sometimes they know a lot about each other. In Norfolk, there's a group, they almost work in a consortium at times. And sometimes a fund administrator, a grants administrator will pick up the phone to another. They're well connected, with each other, know each other for years. And sometimes they say, well, we can't do this £59,200, but if 3 of us came in, we could all sort of, help fund it. So definitely do multiple applications, but also if you have the opportunity to talk to someone at a trust before you make the approach, you might even just want to ask, say, we're considering approaching such a body and such a body. Is there anyone else that you could suggest? So pick their brains if you're having a conversation.
Yeah, they may well be working with somebody. The follow-up to that question was also, if you do approach multiple people and they all say yes, what should happen? You should tell everybody else in the sector, because it's a mini miracle. Yeah. Is that the answer?
Technically, the first one who gives you the funding is the funder. And so thank them profusely. I like them, but then quite often it's more difficult for a funder to take back money once they've gone through that process. Just imagine they only meet once a year. This was their budget for the year. They've allocated the money. So go back to them, but don't just say, oh, well, we've already got our funding. Go back to them with an option. It may be to continue to fund that project, or it may be that project you were only going to do it for 20 young people. It may be you can grow it quicker. So always go back to them with some options and keep those options as similar to what it is, because obviously that fit within their criteria. They may have a specific pot and they may say, well, actually, no, it's for a capital spend. We can't translate it into that. So it may be just occasionally. But to be honest, it's a great way to build a good relationship. It shows you're really honest. It shows that you're attractive to funding, and then keep that relationship going to say, well, obviously, we'll not be accepting the money this time. If they then say, well, we'll not be paying it over. But then just be really cheeky and say, well, can we bank it and come back to you with something else in the near future?
Yeah, make the ask. That's your job as the fundraiser. Make the ask. Yeah.
Oh,
Thanks,
yeah.
Naomi, for the question. I love the hope. Thank you. A couple of things about doing your research now. So somebody had asked what's the best way to research and find grants. I would say funds online, wouldn't I? I'm sure you can add lots more to that. But somebody else was talking about getting volunteers involved and how time consuming that can be, and of course the training and investment that's needed around the standards of quality of information that you're getting back, and so on.
Well, let's just say, and I love funds online. I told you it's my go-to place. I'm hoping Kathy's giving me a brownie point for that. But I will be totally honest. I just never just use one single source. I cross-reference because sometimes you can get some more information. So I'd always check if we're talking specifically now, grant making trust, I would always check, have they got their own website? I would always go to the Charity Commission because I love reading accounts. Now, some of you might think they're the dreariest, boring things that are out. But again, once you get used to the layout, and they are very much a standard layout, because of how SORP, the Statement of Recommended Practice, requires charities, the categories that they have to cover. But once you get used to doing it, you can actually quickly scan read. But you say, just think of that as another resource to actually sort of find out additional information. For those of you who aren't experienced in this as well, I don't think it happens on the Oscar website. That's basically the Scottish equivalent of the Charity Commission. But from my understanding, it does in Northern Ireland, but England and Wales, it's the Charity Commission. When you actually look in and go on the section about a charity, it shows you the trustees. So I'm giving you a really, really good tip, everyone out there now, is have a look at the trustees and have a look at the trust that they're also, look at the trustees of a trust that you're interested in and see if those trustees are involved in any other charities. I would say on the whole, about a third of trustees are also another trustee, at least of one other organisation. So this is a great starting point. If you've already got support from some trusts, then go back to them, make sure you're updating. Don't be rude. I keep telling you, it's P's and Q's. Don't just go to them when you want money. That looks like you're a needy friend. Make sure you update them, give them, see if there's anything you can do for them. You might not think you've much to offer, but it could be they're just after a case study. They're just updating their website. They're just after a really good photo, so you might be able to give something in back. But then again, then use their networks. Say, oh, we've just been looking at such a trust. It looks really good. Do you know anyone there? Could you give us an introduction? So to get an introduction from an existing funder would be great. But also your existing funders, look at who the trustees are of your existing funders. And whilst they're not necessarily the trust that they also possibly belong to, they are what I'd call lukewarm, because whilst they've never supported you possibly in the past, those other trusts, there's a trustee on that other trust who has been part of a decision making of another trust who's given you money. I know it sounds about 2 steps removed, but it means that possibly a trustee has sat round a table or been on a Zoom call when they've made a decision to fund you. So go into this other trust that they belong to. You've got almost like this friend, this warm contact, and say, oh, my other trust has just given them some money. Oh, my other trust has been supporting them for the last 3 years. Oh, they're really good. So again, you've got that warm foot in the door. So again, it's about networking. So again, that's what information, gathering a range of information from different sources. The other one is, again, you're all out there, you love each other. I've seen some of your messages you're sharing with each other. See who a trust has supported, what other charities, pick up the phone and say, can I speak to the trust fundraiser? And actually have a bit of, a conversation. I did an application to a big one a little while ago. It was for £500,000. Before I did that application, I talked to 10 other charities who'd also had money from that trust. And they all shared. 7 of them even sent me their application forms. So just share. Be willing to share with others, but also be willing to pick others' brains.
Okay, thanks, Jill. There's a couple of questions around major donor fundraising.
Right, well, we've 1 minute left.
And so I'm thinking that, but there's a lot of interest in that as perhaps another session. Look, here's a biggie for the end. You'll thank me for this one. Oh, where's it gone? Is it somebody's withdrawn the question? It was about, do you is it worth recruiting a professional fundraiser on a consultancy or as an employee? And so I'm assuming this is a small charity that hasn't yet got a dedicated fundraising role within it. So the answer is it worth doing this?
Well, a bit like you before, you say, I'm DSC, so we've got funds like that. I'm a consultant. Of course, I'll say no. My loyalty is to any charity. My loyalty is to the sector. I will never oversell or undersell anything. And I will actually say that is, if you're very small and you're just starting out, just look around to see who you've got that's close to you. It may be something that your trustees, someone on your trustees can actually get involved with and help. Don't think it's necessary to employ someone totally to do this. You might want to, pick somebody's brains for a short time. if that person's out there, I will offer you half an hour's conversation. You've got to quote this. You've got to quote me on this. I will give you half an hour. Now, don't everyone decide it was you. Find me on LinkedIn. I'll give you half an hour as to some things that you can do yourself as an organization without an external resource. I think it's the best we can do, because I almost feel like Cinderella, and I've just looked at my clock. It's just hit 12 o'clock. So I'm really worried that if we don't draw an end, I think we could probably be here all afternoon, which would be really lovely to do that with everyone. But I'm sure tummies will be rumbling and other meetings, apologies, won't necessarily be accepted. So you say, I have a feeling that you say we're about to disappear. I'm going to go out of my beautiful ball gown. I don't think my purple jumper and necklaces, but you say Cinderella's about to happen. I'm going to go back into my rags, and this lovely, beautiful glass coach is about to turn back into a pumpkin. So thank you to everyone who's been out there and listening. Let me just quickly sort of, put up my screen share. We've lost it. Back to here. So basically, oh gosh, too fast. Next steps, you say there's some resources there to actually sort of just go to sort of the main DSC website to find out those things. But also our next session is Thursday, the 21st of January, your fundraising messaging current times. And the 2nd of February is going digital. Sign up at the ecclesiastical website we've been quoting throughout, but also there's lots of other information resources and the past 2 webinars as well. Go back to those and you may find additional information. So all that's left for me to say now is a big farewell. Thank you for being part of us. Thank you for joining us and for sharing part of your Wednesday morning with us. It's now lunchtime, so you're halfway through the week. Just remember, halfway through another fabulous week where you've been helping bring money into your organization so that you as an organization can carry on doing the incredible, amazing, wonderful things that you're there to do, with the great support of organizations like Ecclesiastical giving out money to those. Thank you all. And I really look forward to seeing lots of you again next week on the 21st. Thanks, everyone. Take care, keep safe. And hopefully some of you might have even had a jab before I see you next week if you're able to join us. Take care, everyone. And remember the other thing, do keep smiling.